does look good though. It's quite a striking car, isn't it? It's funny how everybody's gone, you know, Ibiza, Megane, Astra.
Other side, yeah.
We went there with no expectations really, or at least we went with expectations, but we didn't know what they were, and they sort of evolved during the event. As far as I was concerned, when he dropped the clutch on the start line, the wheels spun and it took off, I was happy. That was at the start of the event, and when he finished the first stage 7th overall, I suddenly thought, hey, maybe we're top 10 here, you know. The important thing is to finish and learn about the car, because it had done no competitive mileage at all. First competitive stage completed, yeah.
Done completed.
What was that time? What time did it do?
What time?
When we went away from it 2 years ago, we went away from it for financial reasons. We didn't have the budget to do both the touring cars and rallying properly. And with the launch of the new Astra, it seemed like a good reason, or perhaps excuse, to come back into something we really didn't want to go away from in the first place. So we took the opportunity to present the ideas, and they were well accepted. The money was found, and here we are back again.
The timescale for this project was about as compressed as you can get in this business, particularly with the pressure of having to get the car homologated and the parts homologated prior to the start of the season. So we were in a situation where we had a brand new car which hadn't even hit the showrooms, and so we were working with basic CAD data back in October, converting that into working drawings, test rigs, jigs, manufacturing prototype parts, testing those, and then building sufficient parts for the homologation, and then having done that, building the first car to test, and then getting the first Vauxhall car out for the Rally of Wales. So it was a very, very compressed timescale. I don't believe it could have been done any quicker.
As their rally engineers, front-wheel drive engineer, since 1984, and this is the first time we've ever actually produced a rally car prior to the car being in production in the UK. And certainly before it was launched in the UK, and it's very, very difficult. Traditionally, what we've done, that's all rally cars. You take a production-based car and you adapt it into rally, and that is the basis of Group A. For the first time, a rally team actually had a highly skilled race car designer in-house designing the components to its optimum. He brought in things like FE analysis, which we hadn't used in the past. It had been sort of, I won't say cars were built like blacksmiths, but I mean, this time there was a controlled technology, and you felt that all the way through the car. Everything was stressed and calculated out first before it was produced.
Certainly there's a lot of engineering thought gone in behind the design of components. We have quite a lot of technology behind us, computerized models. Everything is sort of technology-based that we're putting in there. This isn't sort of tried and tested things. This is quite a detailed understanding of the car. And that's the main emphasis and drive that we have. Really, we didn't have time to do anything twice. So whatever went down on paper, we had to commit to and work hard. Therefore, we had to understand sort of the engineering reasons behind that and be right first time, every time. And you know, just go for, you know, maintain a focus and actually just hit the deadline.
I think it was important to have an experienced element in the team, because the design team perhaps are more used to designing race cars than rally cars, and there has to be, if you like, a steadying influence from an experienced viewpoint, because very often rally car technology is perhaps a wrong word to use, but a little more agricultural than perhaps touring cars or racing cars. It has to be very strong. And you need this understanding. And I think the team that they've got together is a perfect balance with experience and young enthusiasm.
Graham actually built a package that was trying to be all things to all men. So if you wished to rally in the United Kingdom and you needed a suspension that was specific to the UK forests, or later in the year when we go on to asphalt in Ulster, Northern Ireland, or the Isle of Man, he was building a package that was multifunctional. A bit concerned about all those pipes coming out the airbox like that either as well. It's all a bit close and tight, isn't it? Oh, right. I mean, you know, it'll evolve and it'll develop, but I mean, at the moment, I'm a bit concerned just getting through this rally.
If you're following in this, if there's a bit of a breeze, thank God. If it's like this sometimes, if it's still, it gives the number one a heck of an advantage, but that's clearing all right.
You're way too fast, aren't they?
I know. You think, they're never going to stop. That's right.
I think it was the first proper rally that Ray had been on, and I think he was absolutely gobsmacked, to be honest with you. I don't think he could believe the speed of the cars in the forest. I think most people think that, you know, cars on loose surfaces are not going to go that quickly, and these things were absolutely flying. The new kit cars to the latest specification, absolutely flying. And I think he was a bit taken aback by it all.
I thought, bloody hell, isn't it going quick? I was very proud to see it up there, setting competitive times out of the box virtually. So I think those are my thoughts. But they do certainly get around very rapidly. It's amazing the pounding that they go through. But for us to have built a car from scratch and got it on the pace at the first rally was very satisfying for me.
Same time as a Renault. Was it? Was it? Let's see what they're doing to your car.
It's under a class called Group A, and we have to operate within that, and that's 25,000 units have to be produced of the same family. So we have to produce 25,000 Astras before we can start rallying it. Then we're allowed to produce variants on that, and one of the regulations allows us to widen the car 140 millimetre. You can't widen the whole body, you can just widen the wheel envelope, you know, the rear quarter panels and the front fenders to cover the wheels. So you can widen the track 140 millimetres, 70 millimetres. Suspension is relatively free, but that's on the grounds of safety because of the load the cars put through in Safari Rally, the Acropolis Rally, and cornering forces on the asphalt rallies like Monte Carlo. You're allowed to change the springs and dampers and strengthen various components that you wouldn't normally require just to go down to the supermarket. But apart from that, the car is pretty much a basic car.
Most of the car is actually designed here and manufactured at Ray Mallock's. We actually just take the basic bodywork, and then from that basic shell we install the roll cage, which we do quite a lot of finite element analysis on that part, to protect the driver, and then secondly to feed the loads in from the suspension. The front suspension is McPherson strut. It's roughly like the road car, but it has greater suspension travel. The damping is very important to the rallying car, so it's got quite a sophisticated damping system in there. The suspension is where all the loads go through into the car, so it has to be extremely rugged to survive. But then it has to be very easy to work on and service. Ultimately, if a corner does get ripped off, the mechanic has to be able to bolt the new components back on within the 10-minute allotted time before the car goes.
For RML, we wanted to make sure that we were putting our racing car experience into this rally program. We wanted to have a slightly different approach. We wanted to hopefully get the best of both worlds by introducing the experience from guys that have been dyed-in-the-wool rally engineers in the past, and bringing in racing experience, because at the end of the day what you're trying to do is effectively the same thing. You're trying to make a car as fast as possible over certain surfaces and conditions.
Pretty quick to do that. It's just not that loud, is it?
In any competition car, there is always a compromise, and it's a question of making the best compromise, whether it's with a circuit car, how much downforce do you put on against drag, for example, how much stiffness do you put in against weight. So it's always a balance, regardless of what formula you're in. So what we had to do was really get everyone's input from both the rallying and racing side, and just talk through the problems. What are we really trying to achieve? Let's try and get the best balance, a better balance, hopefully, than anyone's got before.
About 5.5, 6 down.
52, 2 seconds down on this.
You can hear that engine bogging down. Yeah.
We obviously have to, for rallying, have to look at the way the engine's going to be used, and the variant types of use for the engine is a great difference to circuit racing. So there are 2 specs of engine, one for tarmac, one for gravel. Depending on traction, the engine is needed to have a much peakier, more powerful engine for more higher grip surface, and on the lesser grip surface, the engine's more tractable, slightly less power, but we have a wider spread of torque. The maximum torque is, for a tarmac engine, would be the same for a gravel engine, but on the gravel engine we have a wider spread of torque, ranging right down at lower speed, or engine speed, and this is to achieve a more tractable engine. We obviously do a lot of dynamometer testing, and this is where we establish the power curve and work with it before we take it further to the car and do some in-car running, but we can look at the whole torque curve throughout the speed range of the engine.
Matt's got the map which should compensate for all the temperatures.
All right, so we've got the right correction factors for the various sensors in.
That should all take care of itself with the engine management. It should all correct itself on the day.
All right, good stuff. So we should be achieving optimum horsepower then, wherever we do.
On the first rally, should be there.
All right. So we're going to be running the new exhaust system fairly soon.
Yeah, that's right.
Do some back-to-back testing with the dyno system and the car system.
Yeah.
And then we'll do some mapping to suit.
Yeah.
And we should be able to get it optimised for the car then.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Arriving?
It's just arrived today.
Yeah? What's it like?
It's a nice piece. It's all carbon fibre.
All right.
It looks really good.
So it
Did the
matches
job
up.
well.
So it matches up with the scuttle and the filter arrangement.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah?
I think it should work quite well.
Oh, good. So we should be able to run it on the dyno fairly soon then and give it a try out.
Test. Yes.
With a rally engine, the performance is a trade-off against reliability, so we have to design parts to be very robust and take some quite heavy abuse. We have very little time to produce the prototype parts and develop them, and then look at the lead time for producing them to go rallying afterwards. So we have to put a time limit on development. So we do machine and manufacture a lot of the components in-house as a one-off or two-off. We've been building and designing engines for 26 years. And I think we have, a lot of experience with rallying and what's required from an engine. We have people that have been here with our company for many, many years and have worked on some of the initial program, yes. This is very helpful to keep the continuity.
Well, basically they're a lot smaller, more compact, a lot less complicated. It's all new this particular time around, It's the first time we've sort of done something that's going rallying straight away, whereas suppose, it's been developed a little bit first. So we'll have to wait and see, but, confident of the engine. Confident of the engine. That won't be a problem.
Generally, the whole engine is quite strong. With a rally engine, the performance is a trade-off against reliability, so we have to design parts to be very robust and take some quite heavy abuse in car over-revving, and then the engine goes from very high RPM down to very little RPM and quite a quick rate of change. This is a big problem for any engine, but a rally engine is designed to take this.
Now with the bore scope, we look inside the bore of the engine and we look for any signs of detonation, contact of the piston to the head, and just the general condition of the cylinder bores. We can turn this round and we can check out the valves as well, see the condition of the seats. And it tells us a lot of how the engine's been running.
Obviously, with the engine management systems of today, they're very complicated. They need monitoring all the time, and this function can only be done by following the car and engine wherever it's going. And we have one guy who engineers this and stays with the car in testing, rallying, at the workshop. He follows the project
the Astra is the star. But behind it is a pretty large team purchasing, funding the vehicles. You've got to kit out your service van. They've got to have all their wiring and generators, racking, shelving, everything in there. And of course down to the obvious kettle. But I mean, it's got to have a power point wired in, generators put in. There's a lot of work goes into the 3 service vehicles that we're currently running. And the spare parts have got to be stocked, they've got to be sourced, they've got to be manufactured.
I think my role in the project is really just to stand back and oversee what's going on, to make sure that the right procedures are being taken care of, that we've got the right kit, the right budget, and the whole project is moving in the right direction. It is very different. I mean, this is the biggest difference, really, in going rally. The engineering, there's an awful lot of parallels, but the actual running of the team is very different. So, for me, it was a question of watching and learning how it's done, and I was quite amazed by the amount of detail that has to be put into it, and just the logistics of getting guys from A to B and making sure that they're in the right place at the right time with the right tyres. So that's a huge area on its own, and we're very fortunate to have guys who are really good at doing that.
It's when they're under stress that you notice any cracks there may be. It was almost as if they hadn't been away. Individually, perhaps they'd done events for other manufacturers, but they hadn't actually worked together as a team before. And to see them just dive in and get straight on with it, it was obvious that we've got a really good team on our hands.
Roger, when the back wheels are off, I need to adjust the damper, so just keep an eye on before the wheels go back on. All right. Okay, John. How many?
13 now.
13.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
I thought it's 12 now, brother.
All right, 5-2. 12 minutes, lads. When you can have the bonnet up. Anybody got a small screwdriver I can do the dampers with?
Well, prior to the arrival at a service area, I will have probably spoken to the driver at the end of the previous special stage. Or he may have radioed, and the co-driver may have radioed a special requirement. On the Vauxhall Rally of Wales, we didn't have any dramas. Everything gelled together, and we were very fortunate. You could have the situation where the driver's clipped a rock and deranged the front suspension, so he will describe it to me. I'll relay that information to the chief mechanic, and he can then deploy his mechanics accordingly.
And the yeah, and the damper. Yeah. Okay.
We used the Armo in the last year before we pulled out in '95, and he was very quick, a little over-enthusiastic at times, 1 or 2 accidents, not always his fault, but was showing tremendous potential. It would have been nice to have had a British driver, but they were all engaged elsewhere, so we decided we'd go for Yarmo. He was very keen to come back and be involved in the development, and for sure he's done a fantastic job so far.
He's the only driver at the moment that's got an A seed in the British Championship, and that's a plus for us. He's got World Rally experience. He has experience of driving other Formula 2 cars and also 4-wheel drive World Rally cars. He's brought an awful lot to the team. His experience has paid off dividends into the car. And I think it will as the year goes on, and we learn from him. And as we run our test programme and he does our testing for us, then that will all feed back to us.
What did you lose with the puncture? Do most of the stage with it?
Yeah. And we was on the road all the time, and it's
just went.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I think the feedback is just different, really. It's what you have to rely on in rallying to get the best out of the car. Yarmo is an excellent test driver, as well as a competition driver. He has a superb feel for the car, and he's very consistent in his feedback, which is what you need. But yes, it is different. We're talking all the time about a feel for the car. The race drivers tend to be much more specific, but in rallying it's all to do with getting the confidence and feel and controllability in the car, which is the main thing we're talking about all the time with Yarmo.
We've got the things coming down over the front door. Yeah. We've got to bear in mind we've got a rally plate to go on there. You know, I don't know what you think visually it's going to be like with a plate over the sharp end of the
colour scheme is borrowed from the touring cars, so we keep the family theme there, and I think it works very well on the Astra. A rally car has to say, look at me, you know, I'm an exciting vehicle. It's got big arches, wheel arches, it's got big wheels, and it sounds good, and it looks good, and it captures the imagination. People want to aspire to something like that. They aspire to owning something of that nature. And if they can't own that, the next best thing they can do is to own an Astra on the road. I'm a big believer that if something looks right, it is right. And right from the first time I saw the first sketches and diagrams of the car, it just looked right. The wheels were in the right place, the wheelbase is right. It's not disappointed. I think something which looks good tends to be good in its performance. The car arrived at Wales for its first rally 5 o'clock in the morning, and I think it turned a wheel for the first time at 2 o'clock in the morning, and having satisfied themselves that it actually did work, they put it in a trailer and brought it over. We had invited 20 of the country's top media along to its media launch the day before the rally, so it was important, having invited everybody and had them turn up at the hotel the night before and have dinner, that we actually had something to show them the next day. And, luckily, as I say, it did arrive, it worked. Didn't work terribly well, but the average person in the street wouldn't have known that.
I think at the end of the day there's no substitute for getting yourself up against a rival. You can thrash all around the forest in Wales all day long, looking at the stopwatch, and the conditions are changing, and yeah, maybe the track's getting faster and that sort of thing. So unless you're actually up against the opposition, it's difficult to measure what's going on. So being out there in a competition is the only real way to sort out what direction you're going in.
It's all in the radiator, and it's linking the water out, and that's the reason why the engine destroyed. Yes, I think it's flowing oil from the pipe. It's a lot of smoke.
They hit something. I was shattered. You know, it's fatal, isn't it? I'd relaxed into thinking, we're on here. I mean, the car was lying 5th. By the time it went out, it was actually lying 4th. In hindsight, we know that the Volkswagen went out, so that would have been a podium. And I was really fooled myself into thinking, yeah, we're there. But I should have known better, because many times in my experience, we've sort of done the last stage and then had a problem and not finished the event.
It was interesting to look at different faces and different expressions. They'd taken it in different ways. The experienced ones just were philosophical and went, that's rallying, wonder what it is, wonder if we can get to the car. Those that were in charge of the coordination were looking at the various ways that we could actually attempt to get to the car, where it was stranded in the forest. Unfortunately, it was in a place on top of a mountain, and there was no access to it, so we just had to wait and bide our time. Your mind is racing to think what you can do to repair it. You've got to trust the driver was an experienced driver, and he knew what was wrong with the car, and we were out, and that was it.
What do you think, Brian?
I really don't know. I mean, obviously the engine would be rebuilt.
Oh yeah.
Automatically anyway, so we'll find out. And it will be logged and...
I believe it can beat them consistently, and I'm hoping and expecting that we'll be able to do that by the end of the year. The good thing is the car is still in the early stages of development, so I'm confident that for next year we can be serious championship challengers.
We didn't really know what to expect. We'd never done anything like this before. We normally go out and we test a car, at the very least, you know, several weeks before an event, before a brand new car hits the forest. We didn't do that this time. We were actually testing the car on the event. But as the event wore on, I got more and more relaxed about it. And I guess at the end of the day, the interest on the car, because it was sort of on its first event simply a week before the public launch, the interest was phenomenal. We got brilliant television out of it. We got a lot of media coverage out of it. The spectators thought it was fantastic, because bear in mind they'd never seen an Astra before, the new Astra, let alone a rally version of it. We got an awful lot out of that first event, and in hindsight, whilst we didn't finish it, it was most definitely the right thing to do, to get out there and compete.